Huge explosion in the capital of Yemen, Sana'a, after U.S. airstrike. This is war, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah, I don't think we're getting any sound out of this, but there is sound. Yeah, sound's not coming through, guys. But we'll come back to that later. I'm not super concerned about people hearing popping noises. But this is the big breaking story. We've got ABC News. U.S., UK launch large-scale retaliatory strikes against Iran-backed Houthi militants in Yemen. The Houthis had made repeated attacks on the Red Sea shipping despite U.S. warnings. Now, we have this story from The Conversation, why Yemen's Houthis are getting involved in the Israel-Hamas war and how it could disrupt global shipping. Basically, there's a video. I mean, have you guys seen this video where the helicopter lands and seizes the shipping vessel? Yep. This is nuts. We had Eric Prince on the Culture War, and he just outright mentioned, I mean, this could shut down a majority of global shipping by controlling this route. The end result is fairly obvious. Massive escalation of war in the region. Iran, of course, has to retaliate in some way. So far, they've been having their militias attack U.S. bases. But this is a component of the Israel war in Gaza. And I got to tell you, it's actually really sad to see, because I remember when we got the breaking news about the Abraham Accords during the Trump administration, and how you get all these liberals and Democrats, these personalities, were claiming that it was nothing, that it was just paying off people, whatever, it's not real peace. And my attitude was, dude, you have flights traveling over Muslim nations to Israel, from Muslim nations to Israel. We are actually moving forward with the basic components of long-standing peace.
Business was being conducted,
yep,
because they probably always wanted to. A lot of reasons why they couldn't, but they changed that. And now, watching the region fall apart so quickly, the capitulation to Iran, and it's just insane, man. The adults were supposed to be back in charge, and
we all knew.
There's so much. You knew. I mean, of course you knew. You knew with the Afghan withdrawal, right? They didn't really want to learn how to win a war, but they wanted to learn about white rage. And the worst, I think, for me for that one, I think we discussed it last time I was on the show, was just watching, the Secretary of State get up there, before Congress, and do his thing. That he was, and I quote, shocked and dismayed that the Taliban did not install a more diverse and inclusive government. But no, I mean, I was like, you're joking, right? But they weren't. That was the Taliban that you've been fighting in a war for 20 years, that throw homosexuals off buildings. You thought they were going to have a trans coalition in Islamabad. Come on.
Well, to be fair, perhaps he thought when China moved in and took over the region,
yes,
that may be a path they move. But no, that's actually unfair, because China has masculinity training for their young people, and they put out commercials or propaganda to get their young men ripped and ready for war.
They're women, too. I watched a video of kids. This is how they're training the kids in schools, is they'll each have 2 basketballs that they're bouncing, and then they jump to the right, and they have the next basketball. So there's all these 24 basketballs in a circle, and 12 kids, or there's a lot more than that, actually.
Hey, but our kids know that there's 4,762 genders, so we got that going for us.
And that doesn't even include the Chinese super soldier program that they also enacted, and are actively genetically gene splicing individuals in order to become the next super soldier. So there's that. But this situation happening in Yemen is a pretty big deal. It's the United States, it's the United Kingdom. They just bombed the capital of Yemen with support of Qatar and Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of history here, because this is the continuation of a previous campaign where the United States and the Saudi Arabians were essentially working with Al-Qaeda and a lot of Sunni rebels, trying to get after specifically these Houthi rebels that are tied into Iran. So there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of declarations here. There's a lot of trade on the line. There's a lot of things at stake here that really are important to bring up during this matter, as of course this conflict could expand very easily to Iran. And if that happens, it's just going to be devastating.
I need to bring up a quick point. I think it was 2 years ago, Luke made a comment on this show that Bill Gates was developing microchips that could function as birth control, and I just started laughing. I was like, Luke, get out! It is not true. And then I Googled it, and
of course it's true.
It's actually it's an implantable microchip that can be activated by an app that would turn on and turn off birth control. So for everybody who heard Luke just say that China is creating genetically engineered super soldiers
with gene splicing technology,
I know there are people watching being like, okay, this guy's crazy. From The Guardian, 3 years ago, China conducting biological tests to create super soldiers, U.S. spy chief says. Intelligence Director John Ratcliffe claims human testing aims to develop soldiers with biologically enhanced capabilities. Okay, fair point. Maybe the guy was lying.
But is it even surprising? I mean, you understand what like they're actually playing to win. Like, is anyone actually surprised that they would be doing that? Like, I'm not even a little bit.
I'm actually surprised. This story's from 3 years ago, not from 23 years ago.
But this is what we know about. Imagine the stuff that we don't know about. And to have another Chinese connection here, it was the Chinese that brokered a larger peace deal that first ended the war in Yemen just a few months ago. They brought Saudi Arabia and Iran to the table and said, hey, we're going to stop fighting each other in Yemen because this was a larger proxy war. I think right now the United States is restarting this war with Saudi Arabia, not just because of the conflict, not just because of the interest of Israel, but specifically for U.S. petrodollar hegemony,
100%.
for global hegemony, and to counter the Chinese here in this very specific region. And this is troubling because the Chinese are using trade as an initiative. They're saying, hey, Saudi Arabia, Iran, let's come to the table. Let's get some energy out there into the world stage. The United States is coming to this situation saying, hey, we're just going to bomb stuff here, and we're bombing one of the poorest countries in the world, when I think we could be utilizing a more diplomatic, a more kind of advantageous policy that would be better for America's interest and America's people. Because right now, with the open borders, the Yemeni terrorists and the rebels...
Yeah, how many Iranian sleeper cells are all over the country right now? They're just waiting to be activated.
It's not even Iranian. It's ISIS that the United States previously supported. It's Al-Qaeda that the United States also previously supported. It's a lot of fundamentalists. It's a lot of radicals that could just very easily walk into the United States and wreak havoc on our way of life very easily with these stupid policies.
We have this tweet from Mario Knopfel. Statement from Democratic House member Valerie Howell saying these airstrikes on Yemen were not authorized by Congress. The Constitution is clear that Congress is the only authority that allows military intervention in foreign conflicts. Every president must first come to Congress and request military authorization regardless of which party he belongs to. I'm really surprised a Democrat came out and criticized unilateral military strikes.
I sort of feel like they've been really fine with war in Eastern Europe and sending, billions of dollars. And then you have, beyond the proxy war, whatever happened to that Teixeira guy that was leaking that we actually had boots on the ground over there. Now he's disappeared for 6 months. We haven't heard anything about that one.
Maybe she's upset because it's not going. The missiles aren't being sent to Ukraine.
Perhaps. I mean, I'm surprised we actually have missiles left, given the way they've depleted our stockpiles. Also a real problem, especially given what you brought up as it relates to China being adversarial and really sort of encroaching on Taiwan and flying the sorties over the top of there. And, our allies are watching what's going on around the world, and we're sort of an embarrassment.
I wonder, I'm 37. In 2 months, I'll be 38. I wonder, were we just those around this age, like Luke and I are similar age, were we lucky in growing up in a time where you had these lesser conflicts that appeared, all around? Of course, you had Iraq and Afghanistan, but you did not have basically every region on the verge of imploding the way we did. But my point, I guess, is before I was born, of course, there was Vietnam. There was the risk of nuclear war with the Soviets. So maybe it's just a wake-up call for millennials.
Yeah, if you watch the borders change over the last 2,000 years in Europe, it's constant warfare taking over countries. And then World War II happened, Hitler, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And there was no more border changes because of liberal economic order. We set up this global military police. Then you see Bosnia break off of Serbia, and that was like the one thing. Then the Soviet Union cracked apart, and it really diffused the tensions. I was talking to Scott Horton about this, and you could argue that we're actually in a state of de-escalation. But but I don't know. There's these internal conflicts now, and the things that you don't see on paper.
It feels. I got to tell you, when I look at what's going on with the war and the conflict and all this stuff, as well as what's going on with immigration, economics, it feels intentional. Like it's almost like Joe Biden and the Democrats know they're on the way out, and if they can't have it, no one can. Yeah. And so they're just. I mean, you look at Afghanistan. How is that anything but intentional? You did not have to abandon the Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night and not tell the Afghan security forces. I mean, line those things up. Let's say you decided for some reason you had to abandon Bagram. Okay, well, you tell the security forces. You don't do it in the middle of the night. You do it in a controlled manner. Let's say for some reason you couldn't tell them. You secure the materials and the weapons and you get rid of them before abandoning them to the Taliban. All of those things happening at once. Now you look at the southern border with the Biden administration facilitating illegal immigration. Yeah. It feels like he's this angry kid. The Democrats are playing ball, and they're like, if I can't play with the ball, and they're gonna chuck it over the fence so that no one else can.
Well, it feels like a child, right? Because I remember when that was going on, I picked up my son Spencer. He was like, I think 9 at the time. and I picked up from school as the Afghan withdrawal was going on, and he's literally 9 years old. And he's like, "Hey, Dad, why would we take out the army before like the people that helped us? I'm not going to be that guy like." My son was questioning, he's 3, and he was asking about nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula, the woke bullshit that you see, out there, with, people sort of virtue signaling. But he was 9, and he was like, why would we leave $86 billion in equipment, Dad? That's a lot of equipment, Dad. Like a 9-year-old knew this, and yet, the adults back in charge didn't. So it has to be intentional. The southern border, you could have just maintained Trump's policies, but that way you can't, the great replacement theory, it's not a theory. I mean, it's reality. Of course they're doing this at this point right now.
I think it's also fair to understand that maybe what could have been happening with Afghanistan is a situation where you leave a lot of arms and weapons to have the Taliban counter Iran and Iraq in the region as well. As of course, there was also a lot of massive terrorist attacks that were just committed inside of Iran by ISIS rebels that also were armed by U.S. taxpayer dollars and even had American trucks with American businesses on the side of them. So when we look at the situation in the Middle East, I think it all boils down to the military-industrial complex and the intel agencies and the powers that be coming in there and just dropping a whole bunch of weapons everywhere and then saying, oh, there's bad guys picking up weapons that we dropped, that we paid for, that we told them to pick up against our geopolitical foes that were going against the U.S. petrodollar. So there's a lot of history here, especially with the war in Iraq that made Iran as powerful as they are right now. There's a lot of things that happened specifically in Syria, in Libya, that have created the current tumultuous situation right now. And we need to understand where a lot of these people are coming from, because the Houthi rebels, they are committing terrorism. They are blocking the trade routes, but they're also saying specifically, stop the war in Palestine, and then, of course, everything will calm down here. And of course, that war is not going to be stopped.
The war in Palestine. I mean, I remember when I first started seeing that. You see the imagery. The Hamas soldiers were carrying M4s. They weren't carrying the traditional AK-47 in a lot of the photos that I saw.
Yeah, that according to the intel reports they got probably from Ukraine.
Ukraine or Afghanistan.
Yep.
Where we left, what was it, 47,000 or significantly more? So, I mean, I guess, instability in the region works out great for the deep state and for the warmongers, but no one else.
Take a look at this article from Reuters. Iran seizes oil tanker involved in U.S.-Iran dispute in Gulf of Oman. State media. And it's retaliation. Okay, so Iran seizing an oil tanker? This is direct. Iran is no longer just using proxies to do this.
Well,
it is escalated now to nation-state level conflict.
Yeah, but the United States does similar action.
Yeah, this is a tanker called the Suez Rajan. It's changed names because it used to be a Greek oil tanker. They were selling oil or receiving oil from the Iranians and then the U.S. went and took the tanker from the Greeks, and they were like, it's ours now, and they sold all the oil. The Americans sold their oil for themselves, and then now they're taking the same tanker, they're taking it back, and because the casus belli that the United States had to seize that thing in the first place was you're using American financial systems to transact, so you're violating sanctions on Iran. Now we're taking it.
Well, I remember when the world had a big problem, my father's like, hey, if we're going to fix these countries, why don't we at least take some of the oil for ourselves and pay ourselves back? And that was a big problem for everyone. But apparently...
Yeah, well, that's the statement he said specifically with Syria, and essentially that's what the United States did. But there was also a very interesting news report. I don't know if you could confirm this or give us more details about this, specifically with Trump requesting a lot of the military personnel to be removed from Syria, and then the generals kind of lied to him about it.
Yeah.
So how can we move forward with a future Trump presidency? How is this going to be kind of handled and approached from here when clearly there's a whole other power structure here that's creating a lot of the chaos?
Well, listen, I think you have to clean house at these places, right? You saw it this week alone with Lloyd Austin. I mean, he's the Secretary of Defense. He's out. It's terrible that he has cancer, but we're, as you mentioned, we're on the brink of 3, now 4, perhaps different possible fronts for escalated conflict. And he's out of pocket for 5 days. They replaced him with a lovely lady, I'm sure, she was on vacation in Puerto Rico. That's wonderful, but you're the acting Secretary of Defense while the Secretary of Defense is in a hospital. The Biden administration doesn't know. They didn't bother to tell him till this week, and all is well, folks. No, but there is a component of it that's just showing you that this deep state, this military-industrial complex, they don't believe that they answer to the civilian chain of command. They're above and beyond. They know better. They haven't really done a great job of winning wars in the last, 50 years or so, but they still know better, and they're going to do whatever they want.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.